Okay, so this came out on Friday, guys. Jeff Snyder had talked about this. I believe it was it was during the Hot Mic podcast. Spicy little episode of the Hot Mic podcast with John Roca and Jeff Snyder. And Jeff had been reporting stuff about Superman, some of the chaos behind the scenes. Gunn had responded to Jeff, sort of debunking the claims. I don't think he responded to him directly, but he responded to the report that was out there, right? And Jeff then rebutted, but then on the Hot Mic podcast gave us some serious tea, talking about how there was a screening for the Superman movie that was bad. It was poorly received. So, before we get into what Jeff said, because I think there's actually people misquoting him and misunderstanding. Like, first of all, I don't think there were multiple screenings. As far as I understand it, we're all talking about the same screening. Okay? But before we get into that, the tea leaves were actually there. And it is something that I brought up because there was a screening, and then all of a sudden, the appearance from Gunn at CCXP was canceled. And then all of a sudden, you hear about the trailer being reworked, which Gunn admitted to. And then all of a sudden, the trailer's delayed. And then all of a sudden, Superman's doing reshoots. Okay? So, the tea leaves were actually there. And some people did call it. And I didn't outright say it, but I was one of the people that said, like, look, these things are starting to add up. This might not be good. Okay? So, there's also this funny thing that happened in a Hollywood Trade article about this, because I do think, like I said, there were other people that were starting to believe that the screening could have been bad. There was an article that came out in Variety that said something to the effect of, we are keeping the buzz about this screening locked in our own fortress of solitude. That's the only thing that was talked about with regards to the screening from the Hollywood Trades. Now, after Jeff made his report during the Hot Mic podcast, that paragraph was edited out of that article, and then it was added back into the article, kind of like Dr. Disrespect. And if we've learned anything about the Dr. Disrespect situation, that kind of editing, it's a bad look. Okay? So Jeff had implied, while on the Hot Mic podcast, that statement from Variety was them basically admitting that the screening buzz was not good, because if it was good, they wouldn't be keeping it in their fortress of solitude. Okay? So, what did Jeff exactly say? What was he actually referring to? Well, what he said was, he saw the Superman trailer. He liked the Superman trailer. Then that night, he went to dinner with a source who Jeff implied was very in the know, very high-profile individual. Jeff goes to dinner with this person. This person explains that there was a screening, not another screening. It's not like they're doing multiple screenings, making tweaks of the movie and screening it again. Why would you need to screen this thing twice? I mean, I guess it's good to get, like, other groups of people's information, but they want this thing locked up. That's the reason nobody heard about the screening. It's a very small group. So there's a screening. You know, probably close friends and family and some executives and some people up at the top, and they see Superman for the first time. And the buzz on the film was not great. Now, some of this is the look of the film and the feel of the film, the effects and where they're at with that, but that's like par for the course. A lot of these things, especially this early on, don't have completed visual effects. So that's like whatever. But the tone and the feel of the movie was compared to, I believe, the Brandon Fraser Mummy and the first Captain America movie. And I think the overall feeling was that, as far as Jeff explained it, it was like fine, but not mind-blowing, didn't feel unique, felt like things we had seen before. While he was on the Hot Mic podcast, Jeff got another text from somebody that works in visual effects, very, very high-profile person. And I believe this person basically said, you're spot on with your take about the Superman screening. Lots of reasons to be concerned. Okay. So that's what Jeff said. Okay? That's like as clear as I can decipher it. And Jeff, if I'm getting this wrong, you can always let me know. I'm trying to be as accurate as possible. That is, as far as I understand it, what Jeff said. Okay, so not multiple screenings, not like the most recent screening after some other good screening went poorly, it was bad. That's what he is hearing, okay? Now, let's be super fair about this. By the way, I had a tweet that was blowing up about this. I deleted it. Partially because, like, I don't need that shit, and it's going to blow up, and everybody will be mad. But also partially because, like, believe it or not, I am actually trying to be super fair about this. Okay? So, let's be super fair about this. It is not uncommon for a movie at this stage to be in a bad state. It's not uncommon for a movie's first screening to have all sorts of notes and for the film studio to then work on those notes and make the movie a lot better, right? Because I mostly cover Marvel, we're super inundated with that formula and how they do things, right? And so especially when you're thinking about the Marvel formula, yeah, screenings, bad screenings, that's par for the course. Gunn himself has actually talked about how the Marvel method has taken horrible movies and made them okay, taken okay movies, made them good, taken good movies, made them great, right? So that it's okay. This isn't like sound the alarm, panic everywhere in the streets. But here's the other side of this that I think is really important to keep in mind. Gunn makes his movies in a unique way. He actually was one of the only, maybe the only writer-director at Marvel Studios that did not use the Marvel method. Meaning, Gunn wanted a totally completed script. He's probably particular about storyboards and things of that nature. A lot of work before rolling camera, right? Which is similar to Zack Snyder, right? Like they like to do this. They like to have it very tight, completely figured out before they go in. That's not really the Marvel method. I bring that up because if we acknowledge that Gunn does things a little bit differently, you have to be fair here and understand that the bad first screening is a little bit more serious because of the way Gunn makes things. Do you understand what I'm saying? He has put so much prep work into his script, into the pre-production. He is the guy that is out here talking about how he's not going to move forward without a completed script. He's talking about the guy who's like, we're not going to set up movies this, that, second, and the third. We want a completed story. This is the guy that has been signaling for a year that he is going to do things different and better than Marvel. So when his first screening is received poorly, it is a bigger deal. It means all that prep work, all the things that he did, the whole like pathos of like, we are going to do this differently, have it nailed down before we get there, and then everything's going to be more smooth. It means this is actually worse than usual. Do you understand the logic of this? So the guy that said, I've done a day and a half of reshoots in the past 3 years or past 3 projects or whatever he said, is now doing more reshoots, tweaks, having to fix things. So on the one hand, I think if you're just being totally charitable, it's not necessarily unusual for films of these size and scale. It's certainly not unusual within the genre. But it's not a great sign, and it does imply, especially because of the way that Gunn has talked about his process and the way his process is different than others, this is worse. This is worse than if a Marvel movie's first screening was bad, period. Now, here's the thing that's weird about this. I think this is coming from executives and business-minded folk. Okay? That's just the impression I get based on what Jeff is saying, how he's speaking about this. So that means that this is a person that is saying this is the tone of this movie, and I just don't know if that plays in today's marketplace. That's the impression I'm getting from the feedback. The ironic part is that the two movies that this thing is being compared to, the first Captain America movie, Brandon Fraser's The Mummy, I fucking love those movies. And not only do I love those movies, I can actually see how that tone is potentially a great fit for a Superman movie. And it's kind of the tone of the trailer. So you could take heart, if you're a Superman fan and you want to cope or whatever, right? You could take heart in the fact that, like, man, maybe this is just some people, they don't get it. Maybe they never got Superman. Maybe these are people that wouldn't have even greenlit Superman. They're making all these statements. But to me, that tone represented in the trailer was great. I think people are underestimating how hungry people are for that tone, hope, etc. So you could read it in a very positive way. You could say these voices are just not getting it. And maybe you're right. And maybe Gunn is right. And maybe that's a good move. However, I would also say the fear here is that this isn't Gunn's exact wheelhouse. And he's replicating other tones. And therefore, it's going to feel kind of like a weak imitation. And it's not going to soar creatively the way that a lot of his other stuff does. So I still think it's like, look, at the end of the day, let's be real. We're talking about hearsay from someone that is reliable, that I do think is being accurate. But it's like 7 layers of separation. We don't fully know. We're speculating here. At the same time, I'm trying to be as accurate and fair as is possible. All is not well over there on the Superman movie. I think they know how important it is. I think Gunn even knows, and I think he's maybe receptive to some of the feedback. We'll see. But not everything's going super rosy over there, and I do think there's plenty of reason to be concerned about the film. So that's the report. That's where there were tea leaves before the report. That's what Jeff has said. That's the reason why this is potentially a little bit more of a big deal than otherwise, because of the Gunn method of making these movies. But there's a lot of possibilities that this is a nothing burger, that it will either be worked out during the creative process, or that tonally it is right and that executives are wrong about it. Right? So, like, you see what I mean? Like, that's as fair as we can possibly put it. And now I'd love to open it up to the questions in the comments and kind of see what you guys think about it. So, like, what do you think about this whole situation? Are you concerned now? What do you think? Let me know.